Okay, so you're now to the presentation stage. What do you need in your presentation? Well, first of all, what's going to be in here actually will vary because, of course, it depends on what you decided to do for part 3. So this is just an example. Now, do you have to use PowerPoint? No, you don't need to use PowerPoint, but you do need to pick a method that's going to best display your data, and PowerPoint is usually the easiest. It's meant to be presented, and especially if you're going to add audio and video, for instance, if you're going for the full 100%, it's an easy way to get it presented. Now, whether you use it or not, make sure when you get through it, whether you're using Word, however you're doing it, you're going to start by you want some sort of title. And then you want something to tell you how you collected your data. So how did you get it? Make sure you explain that. And then I've got like words down here like, okay, cool. This is what I might say if I was presenting it in person, things like that. If I'm going to write it, I would write it as I was speaking it. If I was doing it in Word, if here, adding stuff to here, if I was going to present it, I'd have this, I'd probably do this, I'd actually have the slides up for viewing. And this is what I would be saying. These would be my notes. Make sure to add graphics. We're not looking for an art project here. This isn't supposed to be some fancy smanchy thing, but you should make it look nice, and it should be readable, and it should be clear. It should also not have typos. You want to make sure you have your basic graphs. So for instance, here I started with my frequency distribution, and this is the graph I chose. You're going to have some graph because no matter what you did, you had to do something from column 1. You should have some sort of graph. That's probably a good place to start. I also did all my summary statistics for my different years, as well as my overalls, as well as some thoughts that I had on each one of them. These first couple slides are things that everyone's probably going to have. Everyone needs to have an explanation of how they got their data collection. You don't need to certainly list all of your 50 data points. Obviously, you're sending them to me to grade, but for here, you don't need to list your data. You do need to somehow summarize it in whichever graph you decided to do that, and then you're going to want to present your summary statistics. That's the mean, mode, median, and the standard deviation. Here, I did it for each separate year, but this is going to depend on your data. Then you're going to go on and you're going to do your different tests. So for instance, this is the binomial, and I did one for each of the different years, looking at it, and then again, I'm going to explain it as I put it up there. And you might not have done a binomial, so you might not have this. This is going to be okay. Now you're going to start going through each of the things you did in part 2. Okay, I did a Poisson. I'm going to do a Poisson here. I did a null hypothesis test. That's going to be here. It's whatever I did. For instance, and as you're doing it, you should be explaining, well, what does this mean? What does this tell me? Here you can see I have confidence intervals, and again, you might not choose to do that. You might choose to do that. You're going to want to write them out in words. You might want to put the ones, but then maybe you're going to say it out in words. If you're not recording, you're going to want to type it out, whichever, again, works for you. I did a bunch of different overlaps, I made a visual presentation of it. Do you have to do that? No. It's again, whatever works for your data. And again, looking here now, I ran an ANOVA. Those are my hypotheses and my conclusion. And then, what did I learn? So, means are not the same. Now, again, I can't say which one's different. I would have to run a Tukey, and maybe I did, and I would throw that in here, things like that. And then everyone should end with some general thoughts. What overall are the takeaways from all the different tests I've ran, the pieces I did? What does this tell me about this? Is there anything I can report? I can say that 2002 was warmer, but I can't really report any trends. Maybe I want a larger sample of years. For instance, if I really wanted to look for some sort of warming, I'd probably want to look at a 100-year span, take the average October temperature for, the past 100 years doing every other year, so I get 50, something like that. And again, that might be what what are my overall thoughts? How could I make this better? What might be my recommendations for future research? So this wasn't meant to be a presentation. I didn't actually present here. What I did here was I wanted to show you what I'm expecting. And obviously, as I said, you don't have to use PowerPoint, but you do need to make sure it's somehow bringing together everything you've done, explaining the entire project so that your classmates can understand it. And the idea too, as I tell most students, is think about this if you were presenting this to your boss and you're selling this, you're trying to convince them to do something. Like, I want to try this new sales tactic and this is why I think it should work. Here's my data. Here's what I did. I'm predicting that we can increase by 10%. You want to sell your data. And then like, hey, you're still not sold. You pull this data and I can look at it this way or something like this, or we can test it over the next month and see how it works before we go, full barrel. Things like that. That's what you want to be looking at as you do this presentation.